All right, it's time for another NZ Aviation Podcast. In these epic times that we're living through, coming out of lockdown, Martin, here I am in the bunker in Auckland. I've been lucky. I've been an essential worker, so I've been out and about for the last 6 weeks. I've noticed a big difference in the last few days. There are cars on the road again, people bustling around, albeit many with face masks. I think we are where you were at about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And we are now at where you'll probably be in about a month.
Okay, you're at Roma, which is Queensland, Australia, and you've got another perfect day there. Every day must be like this pretty well, eh?
Pretty much. It's nice and cool in the mornings, and it heats up to about 25, 26 every day.
It's really heating up in Australia aviation-wise, with Virgin Australia in administration. The administrators, whole group of the heavy hitters, have found themselves some money to keep going during a sale process. About 8 entities have lined up to swoop on what's left. They've got close to $7 billion debt, and I can see a lot of the reporting is many people are surprised that debt is so big. How did that happen?
Well, they haven't made any money in 10 years, and it's just been crazy that anyone's been financing them. Obviously, the shareholders have been willing to put that type of money up in the hope they're going to get something back, and it turns out they're going to get nothing back.
Yeah, it's kind of carnage. Of course, the Queensland government was talking about maybe buying the airline, though I think the federal government wasn't too happy about that.
No, it's a very emotive issue, and the Queensland government's putting in a bid of about $200 million, and their sole purpose, according to them, is to keep the jobs in Queensland. Yeah. As the federal finance minister pointed out, you can't even run the state. How do you think you're going to run an airline, which didn't go down well? But yeah, they keep banging on about, are we putting this bid in so we can preserve the jobs in the headquarters in Queensland? And I don't know. I think it's a waste of time, actually. I don't think, as we've discussed before, we don't think that Australia can afford 2 full-service domestic airlines, and I don't think anyone else thinks they can either.
They could probably afford low-cost airlines, though, and that's, of course, how that airline started. And I see that Indigo, one of the big Indian carriers, is interested, and they've been saying that if they end up with Virgin Australia, they'll return to those days. We've described them as, the plucky little low-cost carrier that they were when they started up, and were quite successful in that time. And Indigo is a huge-scale airline, so there's someone talking about getting back to that knitting. But then now you've got Rex Aviation. They've been around for almost 20 years. They operate a fleet of, I think, of about 60 Saab 340s, which is way bigger than I ever thought, to amazing rural destinations in Australia. And most of the towns and areas they service, they are the only operator, so they've got a great network. They're talking about operating narrow bodies between the main cities, sort of low-cost carrier style. So obviously, while Virgin is in trouble, there are opportunities for others. Rex have been there a long time.
Rex has been around for a while, and it's actually thrown a bit of a spanner in the works. And I mean, Rex timed their announcement really, really well, because it's put a real spanner in the works of the Virgin sale, because if you look at the business models, Rex is probably, when they're not going to be encumbered by 15,500 ex-employees, whoever bids for Virgin is going to have to convince the administrators and perhaps the Queensland government that they're going to re-employ as many of those people as possible. And some would argue that the problem Virgin had is they had 15,500 employees and weren't making any money.
Yeah.
So Rex coming with this offer, the smart money might well go to Rex.
Well, I mean, my gut feel is that they're a better prospect.
Yes, start small and slowly grow with sensible management and wise investment, as opposed to start bankrupt with 15,500 employees and a whole lot of planes you don't need. And that's exactly what people are saying. Rex has really, put one over on the potential sale of Virgin.
But it's not as if they're small. I mean, they already have an extensive network, got a big fleet, and all that can, they can channel, I would imagine, people from rural towns all the way to the big cities. They really do come to the table with something. And, I mean, there are those Tiger aircraft and crews sitting around doing nothing. Narrow bodies, 737 next generations and A320, standard, the older engine types. I mean, there'd be a dime a dozen, wouldn't they? There are hundreds of them potentially sitting around doing nothing.
Absolutely. Aircraft are cheap. Rex will be able to offer the experience of flying from, I don't know, Wagga Wagga to Brisbane, all on the same airline. You wouldn't have to take your luggage out and swap it. No interline agreement required. I think they've got the backcountry that will feed people into their network. If they can get an alliance with an international carrier, that they could do very, very well. Can you imagine if, say, for example, Emirates stepped in and said, "All right, we'll do or they won't because of Qantas, but let's say another big airline, Turkish, which flies to Sydney, says, "Oh, we'll finance Rex, and if anyone wants to go overseas, bring him to Sydney, and we'll chuck him on a Turkish Airlines plane."
Yeah.
That would be quite good for people living out in the country.
In fact, you bring up a very good point. Those really big carriers that have the big hub system, the sort of global transit sort of hub with huge fleets, they could be in a very good position to come in and just pick up all the opportunities from the carnage of airlines going under, and no one can really stop them because they still have the capacity. They can operate at huge scale, and they're not going to be sitting around doing nothing.
Well, I reckon that's exactly what Emirates is going to do. Emirates is going to come down this part of the world and try and mop it up. I think particularly in New Zealand. New Zealand's talking about not getting full capacity back until 2023. Emirates just announced that they're restarting they're beginning to ramp up all their Australia flights from June 21. So pretty soon, if you're in Auckland and you want to go somewhere and you can't get an Air New Zealand flight, which is looking increasingly unlikely, why wouldn't you fly Emirates? And once you're in the Emirates system, generally the people who fly Emirates quite like it. And they fly to a lot of places. I think it's a serious threat for Air New Zealand. So, they might come back to full capacity in 2023, but full capacity might not be what it was. I mean... No,
they're talking maybe... 70, 80% in that time. Also, social distancing on aircraft are difficult, but if you've got an A380, you can still get a few people in, even with the distancing.
I think as more data becomes available and more analysis is performed, I think that social distancing will go out of the window as long as you wash your hands, wear a mask, and don't be silly. I think that's just not viable. You can't run an airline with social distancing. It's ridiculous.
Well, we won't have a tourism industry unless there is some sort of herd immunity or testing system that is very quick, so you can make rapid decisions on many people at the border in short periods of time. Until that comes back, the tourism industry here is really just the Australian and maybe the Pacific bubble and domestic tourists. Air New Zealand...
Money talks, Paul. Money talks.
You think so?
They'll get over that pretty quick once they realize how much money they're going to lose. And also very interesting. So Roche, that Swiss pharmaceuticals company, has come out with a very cheap and highly accurate antibody test, which will enable the authorities, such as they are, to work out who's had it and what the effects on those people have been. But also, what's even more interesting is the most common test that, for example, the White House has been using every day because they test their staff daily now. At best, it has 20% false negative, so it's telling people they don't have it when they might have it. And some tests have shown it's about 50-50. So people are getting the all clear, and they might not be all clear. And that's a very common test. I think it's Parker Pharmaceuticals. It's the most common swab test that they do. Apparently it's highly unreliable. So, back to the drawing board. But there's an antibody test from Roche.
Do we want to
tell you if you got it?
Do you want to live in a world where anytime you want to go anywhere, you have to have a whole lot of medical tests and give up all your your personal genetic and biological information. Why not do it for the cold? Why not do it for a whole range of things? Based on the numbers, you would, but this specifically, it's a good question, isn't it?
Well, as someone who's in my time in Australia hasn't really been affected by the shutdown, the only thing that is beginning to bug me is because I like to travel. The fact that I might not be able to is causing a little bit of mild concern. I'd be happy to get tested at both ends of the journey if it meant I could go.
Right. No, I know people would still do that, but when you think about it, it's very controlling for what seems to be, in the scheme of things, maybe something that doesn't quite rise to that level of, what's the word? Attention.
Concern. Yeah. Danger. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, any disease or anything should, on that basis, should be testing people for everything all the time.
I'm pretty sure sampling at airports is going to become a way of life, and it probably should be. And if they get the sampling plan, it won't be particularly onerous. It won't be. You won't need to sample everybody.
You've locked up, mate. I don't know if we really want to live in a world, or if I want to live in a world where everywhere you go, you get tested and everything's run through machines, and it's. I think that's overkill, but it probably will be a reality for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think one of the what would you say, criteria of international travel is going to be you are going to have some sort of COVID tracking app on your phone. I reckon that's.
But why COVID? I mean, there are other things that people get. More people get the flu. Why is this thing being singled out? This is a panic. COVID's being used as the lever for the one world government, Paul. Someone had to say it.
I had to say it. Yeah, I've got some friends who are convinced that's the reason behind it. I don't believe that's the case, but yeah, I mean, why COVID? And then some people say, well, why not COVID? And think of how safe we can make you, and think of the anxiety we can reduce. Because you turn on the radio here, and everyone's just going on about how anxious they are. Like, God's sake, get a grip.
You mean women?
Well, I didn't say that. I said people, Paul. People.
You can hear the hands ringing all the time. And Martin, be kind. Be kind.
Yeah.
That's what we've been told.
Yeah. Be
kind. You're telling a nation of passive aggressives to be kind.
Yeah, true.
Good luck with that. In fact, it's this lockdown thing it's easing off. It remains to be seen whether it was the right decision or not. Personally, I think it was overkill. It'll be shown to be overkill. You'll never be able to verify that, because you can always say, well, you don't know. If we hadn't done these things, it might have been a lot worse. But certainly there's some issues that have come up. Turns out that the government didn't have full legal authority to shut the entire nation down and to police or enforce that shutdown. It seems that it was more legal if it was done by region. It wasn't done that way. No one ever questioned that at the time. No one said anything. And then the government was reluctant to release any information that went into making their decisions. Always rings an alarm bell. And of course, we've just had a budget here, and we're going to be paying this off with 50% GDP debt, which is still, I mean, Japan's 200. I get that, but it's a huge drag on the finances. It's going to cause a lot of unemployment, which is going to cost the taxpayer. The government thinks that we can get back to pre-COVID employment levels, but that's all through paying people to go out into nature and pull out weeds and things like that. I mean, that doesn't earn you money. It doesn't. It's a job scheme. So it remains to be seen how it turns out. Interesting to watch in the United States, the way the states have been dealing with that. Florida, I see they're all back on the beaches in Florida already, sort of screw you attitude. The mayor of Los Angeles is saying they could be locked down till the end of July. Okay, I hope he's ready for the rioting, because that's surely going to happen. Meantime, people lose their jobs, things go under. Back here locally, you may have caught up with the news that in Nelson, 89 people are going to lose their jobs at the what used to be the Air Nelson base, but the Air New Zealand turboprop maintenance base. They're closing that down. I guess that has something to do with Virgin Australia, because they had quite a fleet of ATRs, didn't they? That went through there.
And I mean, there's been talk of that base closing for years, isn't it? And I mean, it's kind of inevitable. A small airline, small country, how many maintenance bases do you need for a maintenance base which is not going to be as busy as it used to be? And it kind of makes sense to move it to Christchurch.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a blow
unfortunate
to the community. It is for sure. Air New Zealand are resuming a lot of their domestic flights. Already been told by the CEO that they're not going to be cheap because of this distancing. They're going to have to charge maximum. He said, we won't be able to offer any of our extra low airfares for a while. And I thought, well, they were never extra low.
No.
So,
no.
I don't know where you got that one from, mate.
Dream time.
Anyway, so that's happening, and they're flying a 787-9 between Christchurch and Auckland 3 times a week with cargo. So obviously they have to keep the machines working, eh?
Yeah, get them out there, get them flying. And on this side of the I guess what is it, the sea? Interesting sights. 2 days ago, I saw 2 A330s, each towing a C-17 across the sky. So practicing refueling at about 10,000 feet. So it was low. You could see everything. Wow. That was cool.
Yeah.
And yesterday, a C-27 Spartan came into the local airport.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so the skies are clear. They're flying around. They're taking advantage of it. The Air Force have been flying the 7.5 around, doing training, approaches and touch and goes at some of the runways around New Zealand, I guess because they can. There's no traffic.
Yeah, I guess that's what they're doing here. I mean, it was pretty cool to see those tanker planes. And, of course, Airbus have just got a one-up on Boeing. They've got their fully remote fly-by-wire refueling probe working, which they couldn't get to work on the KC, the KC-97?
The 86. Was it the 86?
I don't know.
Yeah.
46.
46, yeah, the 767.
The 767, the new tanker, that was meant to have a fully automated, remotely controlled, fully automated and remotely controlled boom. And they haven't been able to get it to work. And yet Airbus seem to have squeezed it into the A330 to the point that they just sit in sort of a cockpit in the middle of the fuselage and push a button, and it kind of lines itself up and hooks up. If it doesn't hook up, they can do it manually with a joystick, and apparently it's just passed all its tests.
Wow. I mean, I wonder where, let's think about the manufacturers. There was a talk a few weeks ago from the Airbus, head of Airbus, that, their future was a bit uncertain. There hasn't been much more talk about that. Boeing, of course, they've got huge losses. They've got all those Maxes piling up. I wonder if you're going to see basically a giveaway of a lot of those aircraft.
Because they've had 500 cancellations. They've had no orders for 2 months straight. The new CEO of Boeing, Mr. Calhoun, has really upset people by saying that, in his opinion, due to this downturn, that one US major airline is going to go bankrupt, which really upset one of those majors because, hey, we're one of your major customers. We didn't ask you, we didn't want any talk.
Which one?
This. The money seems to be on American.
Right.
But they'll get bailed out again and again and again. So,
yeah. What about Delta, though? They've grounded the 777 fleet, the entire fleet.
Yeah, that was a shock. Hey, well, I mean, it was a shock, but if you look at their fleet, it was the smallest part of their fleet. It was a mixture of 777-200 ERs and LRs. The 777-200s were relatively old. The LRs were actually quite new, but they're a big, heavy plane that doesn't carry any more than the A350. And, they've decided to get rid of the whole lot. I think 12 or 13 of them.
Because everyone that goes out of service, Boeing loses on the support.
Yes, particularly because it was around the 777s when that worldwide service thing, or whatever they call, came in. So they will all be under quite expensive or quite profitable service contracts. Interestingly, they're not retiring the 767-400 at this point in time, which means they must really like it. And I think on transatlantic routes, it's probably quite a profitable aircraft, but probably not as good as their A330neos. So if they buy any more A330neos, that will be a sign that the 764s are going to go.
Right.
But yeah, they're gonna start flying A350s to Sydney.
Yeah, they obviously like that plane, hey?
They do. They obviously like the Airbus product. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically become an Airbus airline.
Which is and it's a hell of a thing if you look at it, how successful Airbus has been in Boeing's heartland.
Yeah,
it is quite surprising. I'm still surprised that so it must be pretty good or cheap. I don't know. Boeing might have another problem with America the way it's going now. The America's just put China on a list of basically they're threatening full-out sanctions, and China has started placing American suppliers, major American suppliers, on I think they call it an untrusted entity list.
Whoa!
So that means Boeing ain't going to be selling no more planes in China for a while, and that will force movement, because Boeing cannot afford to have China not buying aircraft. Unfortunately, Boeing's white-handed themselves the same as the rest of the world has. They might not like China, but they can't do without China.
Yeah. Meantime, there's talk of some sort of, it sounds like a bit of CPR on the old 757, and or maybe the 767, sort of kind of bringing that back, re-engined, as some sort of attempt at that middle market type thing, or to defend against the A321 Neo extra long range. I don't think you can defend against that with a product which is essentially really old now.
No, it would require re-winging, and then that raises the ugly. Is it actually a does it require recertification? Because of course the Americans are going to be, or the FAA are going to be all over that. So they're talking of a 767 potentially with a new cockpit, 787 style cockpit, and a new wing. The moment they announce that, Airbus will announce the A322, which will be an A321, an extended A321 with a bigger wing and more fuel. And I'm pretty sure, like the 767-400, some American airlines will own it, will buy it. Maybe they'll sell a few overseas, but they did the 767-400, and I think only 2 airlines bought it. It was Delta and Continental. It never really went anywhere. Couldn't compete with the A330. And I think exactly the same thing will happen with it, because they're talking of the 767-200 as well, not the 300. So the short, stumpy one with a new wing, new engines, and a new cockpit. By the time they've done that and got it through certification, it'll be 5-6 years down the road at least. In the meantime, Airbus will have got the A322 out the door and start expanding that. And they're on a hiding to nowhere. There's also talk of a thing called the 757 Plus, which is basically, it's a paper exercise at the moment where they're just saying, what if we made a plane roughly the size of the 757, called it the Plus? Would anybody be interested? Now, if a lot of people are interested, Boeing will have to go and develop it, because all the articles I've read say you cannot update the 757 sufficiently unless you do significant redesign of the wing, the systems, and the actual fuselage, because apparently for its size, the 757 is quite heavy.
Yeah, well, I think it's basically the 7.3 or the 7.2 fuselage cross-section construction.
Yes, with yes, and the 7.2 fuselage was quite heavy due to it wasn't just an extended 737 because of the engine at the back and everything, and the way the wing was mounted, it was quite different. So they had to do a lot of work on that. And so 757 Plus is a non-starter. 767 Plus, or whatever they call it, is potentially easier. But I think they're just chucking stuff up in the air to see what people want to catch. And when you're picking up stuff, not just reheated, but reheated I don't know how many times. It doesn't even look good. What are they going to do with all those 7.3 Maxes? Because getting back to what they make on the
on the support during the service of the aircraft, it would almost make sense to get as many of those planes back, even if you're having to give them away, just so for another 20 or 25 years you're supporting them and selling parts and all of that.
Yes, but the problem is now, is the demand even there? I mean, even if you told an airline, we're giving it to you, but we're going to charge you $150K a month to run it, they might say, yeah, you know what, we'll go and buy an old 737-800. Because you can get that for $1 million, and you can maintain them. There's enough out there to make them cheap to maintain and manage. So, and if the 737 MAX needs simulators and retraining and all this, I'll just say, forget it.
It could be over for it.
This couldn't have come at a worse time for that aircraft. Yeah, I mean, it was going through pretty bad times anyway, but now, yeah, it might well be, actually.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll ever get into that backlog. Maybe never. Meantime, though, Airbus, they have the 220 there as well. So they've kind of blocked off all the exits.
They have. They really have. They have been quite fortunate in how things have panned out for them. They were very, 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 I keep saying it, very lucky with the A330. That just, the A300 was, they were really worried about the A300. Took ages to sell a lot of planes. And just by slowly working it into the A330, that plane is basically the backbone of course, the narrow bodies have done extremely well, but that A330 has made them a lot of money.
You see a lot of them, don't you?
You see a lot of them. And they're nice to fly on. And the A330 Neo, the people who are operating them say they're fantastic. And all that what do you call it, hype about the carbon fiber 787. At the end of the day, it's no cheaper to run than an A330 900 or 800.
As it turns out, yeah, exactly.
As it turns out, right?
Yeah, it's everything is in disarray. Interesting to hear that Lufthansa is converting. It's kind of a halfway house conversion. It's not full conversion, but A380s to carry cargo. What are the possibilities that instead of seeing A380s go to the desert to be pulled to pieces, that they might actually become in the future the backbone of the international parcel transportation industry?
Well, as long as you can fill it up with light stuff and you don't need the strengthened floor beams, I think that would be a fantastic idea for somebody. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. Put a big door on the top deck and the bottom deck, home you go.
Yeah, you think of the cubic meterage.
Yeah. 150 tons trans-Pacific, non-stop. Yeah,
and well over a couple of hundred to choose from.
Yes, I think the smart money will go onto that. It would be very odd if it didn't.
I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to look like. Do you think they'll blank out the windows?
It depends. I mean, if they go the whole hog and make a dedicated passenger to freighter conversion, they'll blank out all the windows and they'll put doors in. At the moment, what they're talking about, it's a light conversion, so they're just going to take the seats out, probably put the window shades down, but if it looks like it's going to make money, definitely they'll do a proper conversion. Maybe strengthen the upper floor, but maybe just strengthen the lower floors, put heavy stuff on the main deck and all your light stuff on the top deck.
What about all the 777s that might become available? Do you think there's any hope for them in freighter conversion?
There are some freighter conversions being discussed. I don't think any of Delta's will, because they're 200s. I don't think anyone needs a 200 freighter. But I guess there'll be 300 series freighters.
Was it very widely reported that that stoush between Qantas and Perth Airport?
Yes. But
I mean, Perth were almost about to go to the debt collectors to get the money.
It's crazy, and there's a lot of talk now about quite a lot of talk now. Why aren't these nationalized? What gives these airports the right to hold people to ransom like this and charge everybody who crosses their doors a freaking fortune, and landing fees, the shopping mall experience, the whole thing? It's just ridiculous.
Voracious, I think is the word.
But then you've got situations, like in New Zealand, and the airport has to pay the border force, whatever they're called, to provide the customs agents. So
it doesn't even come out of tax.
I know, for example, that courier companies, if they want to have on-site customs control, they have to pay, and they have to pay quite a lot of money. So one of the reasons your parcels are held up at the airport, it's because they don't want to pay the border control people more money to come and sample those parcels. They say, it's too expensive for us. So we'll just have two, and there'll be a backlog because we're not paying the extra money. They want to check it, but we have to pay.
Wow.
Kind of weird, eh?
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
It's user pays. This user pays model for government services is I'm not very fond of it. Let's put it that way.
No, I'd be with you on that one. You pay your taxes for that, don't you?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
You would.
Get ready to pay more taxes, but enough of that.
Well, that's the thing. There will be more taxes. I mean, how do you pay for this huge spend up? It's amazing how much a couple of months can cost, eh?
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Well, they should have sent the government home because they probably all went to work, and that's probably what's put us in the debt we're in.
Yeah, none of them eased off.
Yeah. No, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the airline world. Like I said, I reckon Emirates is going to come in and try and mop up. Some of them will try and mop it up.
They've got the capacity. That's the thing. Only a few have got that level of capacity.
Yeah. That's going to be. New Zealand might be in for a bit of a shock.
Yeah, I see. Qatar are saying that they're going to put all their A380s on the ground, maybe not flying again.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, you're going to see that everywhere, aren't you? Qantas have got two running, I think, at the moment. Are they going to come back, do you think?
Probably not. They're probably, as part of this Project Sunrise thing, which has obviously been put on hold, but if that goes ahead, they'll probably do a deal with Airbus to get rid of the A380s and take a few more A350s.
A bit of tension occurring between China and Australia and New Zealand over this, call for an inquiry into where this virus came from, and the sort of veiled threats, coercive sort of statements from the Chinese. I take it, I think the Chinese airlines, or one or two of them, are still operating into New Zealand. What about Australia?
Yeah, they're still flying into here. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're more than airlines, aren't they?
Well, yes, they're government departments. What's also very interesting here is the real estate people and the building association are getting really, really worried about, and they want special permission to allow all the foreign students and everything back into the major cities, because they say without them, the whole building economy just collapses. And you're like, really, is it that far that the only thing keeping Australia afloat? And that's basically what they're saying. They said the only thing that's keeping the Australian economy afloat is temporary immigration, bringing in these students. And he just
wow.
Like, guys.
And I would imagine kind of the same here.
Yeah, you should have thought more about that, because it's you have given. So on the one hand, this disease has stopped them, but you've shown the level of weakness in that regard. So if China really want to get to you, they won't put sanctions on a few meatworks or the barley exports. They'll just stop all their students coming back for a year, and Sydney, apparently, by all account, that the building companies will go under, all the student accommodation, this, that, and the other. And now the universities are saying, we won't have enough money next year.
And
wow.
You've heard similar here too, with Auckland University. They were really desperate early on in this to try and have, even in the midst of it, students still able to come through. They didn't care.
Interestingly enough, England hasn't stopped. They haven't had quarantine. I think they're only bringing it in this week. So you've been able to fly to England and wander through Heathrow and leave.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting, eh?
Why would they have done that?
I don't know. They just didn't do anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially as Boris Johnson got it real bad, apparently. In fact, I've seen a few speeches from from him since he's recovered and come back. And I know he's just had a child, and that, at his age, it would be difficult and all of that. And he's the Prime Minister, very busy, but he doesn't seem to be quite his old self in the way, in that flamboyance, that sharpness of, he was bumbling, but he was sharp about it.
It's interesting you say that, because there was in between the articles or the radio programs going on and on and on and on about anxiety and how anxious everybody is. Somebody did actually say that Dominic Cummings, the chief advisor, Boris Johnson, the health minister, and another guy, they all got corona. And this guy said, none of them have come back as effective as they were.
Wow. Well, there are reports of sort of legacy conditions that come from it. You're not quite over it when you think you're over it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that explains a lot of my current behavior. Yeah.
Okay.
Be careful.
All right. Well, at least you're onto something now, and it's not so much of a mystery.
So it's not me. It's not me. It's the disease.
It's a virus. It's the silent killer, or I think Trump likes to call it now the plague.
The plague.
He calls it the plague now, which is it conjures up sort of those visions of the Black Plague.
He's probably pretty worried because that test the White House has been using is very unreliable. So, geez, He could will himself out of it. I don't know. I think he's a germaphobe. I think it would freak him out.
No, he is a germaphobe. I think he freely admits it too.
Yeah.
Lots of people are germaphobes now, Martin. You'd be surprised.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where I work, people are, good on them, but I've never seen desks cleaned like they are now.
Yeah. I keep my desk quite messy because I give the virus something to do before it gets onto me.
Well, sanitizer is just everywhere. Hand sanitizer. I went out shopping this morning. 3 times had to do hand sanitizer. I said to one of them, I've just done hand sanitizer. Well, you can't come in unless you do it.
No, they've stopped all that here. They've stopped it all.
Okay.
They did that for about 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think middle of last week, I think they were still meant to be doing it, but no one was doing it. The only thing, and I'm going to go to the supermarket after this, the only thing they had in the supermarkets was some dots on the floor, and only every second automatic checkout was allowed to be used. You had to keep your social distancing. But then, they had this room with all these checkouts through it, but then you all had to go through a very narrow exit to get out, and you all had to stand in line to get into it. So you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I've been watching, there's so many great airport videos on. You just put them in the background like wallpaper, all shot in 4 and 6K, so beautiful quality. It's like being at Frankfurt or Chicago. You can sort of have virtual plane spotting sessions. Some of those videos run for 3 hours. And we were talking the other day, you had a site that you come across which had all the old British fighters on it.
I'll share that with you. Yeah, this is a great site. If you're interested in this type of thing, it is. It's called Thunder and Lightnings, and
all right.
It is all the British Cold War aircraft. So you got the Buccaneer, the Gannet, the Hawk, the Hunter, the Jaguar. I won't go through them all. But this is a really great site because you like, let's click on the Gannet, for example, a particular favorite of mine. You can read on for the history of the Gannet. I'll click on that. And there they've got history, survivors, profiles, galleries, walk around. And then they've got interviews with some of the pilots that flew them. And it's really, really interesting. It's really fascinating what England threw up into the sky during the 50s and 60s. Just crazy, actually.
So many.
It's Thunder and Lightnings. A really good site.
Looks good. Yeah, this it just keeps getting better. Another thing I've been enjoying watching is some of those radio control guys, with really big models like of airliners and the Concorde and they all fly really well. It's amazing.
What's a very, if you look for them, I forget what it's called, but there's these guys that, so you got the guys that make the big planes with the jets and everything that fly around outside, and that's really cool. But you get these indoor ultralight but large models. So there's this guy, he's made an A310 that's incredibly light, right? And it's got ducted fans, electric motors, but he's done the leading edge slats, he's done the slotted flaps, he's done every single thing. And because it's so light and so, you've got minute little motors in it, it actually flies to scale.
Oh, right.
So it doesn't like leap off the ground. It actually has to get the nose up and it drifts up into the air, then he flies it around. Then when he lands it, he has to flare it. These things are just amazing.
Oop.
Yeah, it's amazing. Those large models that have flown indoors are absolutely incredible.
I think I've seen that, and there are other people or people making other models now too. And that's the thing; they fly to scale, so they don't have that sort of comedic sort of craziness about them that you get when the thing's not fly. Actually, the physics aren't to scale. It's amazing how slow they can fly. Those things, where they're flying about 5 or 10 miles an hour, something like that.
Yeah, they just drift through the air very slowly. There's also some really cool videos of what's that big Hawker? The Hawker Tempest, was that the big fighter? No, the Sea Fury. Sorry, the Sea Fury.
Oh yeah, the Sea Fury. Wow.
The guy's made a model of the Sea Fury with a 7-cylinder geared radial, so it actually sounds like a real one.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
that sounds fantastic. But I mean, the Schadenfreude is actually, I do sometimes enjoy watching. There's a video of a guy who made this absolutely wonderful Saab Gripen, and he's putting it through its paces, and he does a low pass, and he pulls up, and it just turns into confetti at about 200 miles an hour.
Couldn't take the G.
Yeah, it was a bit sad.
Oh well, yeah. They do like people who get a good flight. They get a lot of applause. I've noticed in those gatherings. But some of the things are looking very realistic. You got to do a double take in the sky, especially some of those bigger scale, smaller. Like I saw one. What's the plane that the red arrows fly? The Hawk. There was a Hawk, and that was quite big. It was probably about 6 or 7 feet long, and it had some great detail on it. When it was flying, you almost couldn't tell that it wasn't the real thing.
Well, there you are. You've come back. You were frozen for a while.
Which bit did you miss?
Quite a lot, actually.
Okay.
But I don't know. It may have recorded in which you've got me saying I can't see you, you're frozen.
Oh, well, I can easily cut that out. Okay, let's get on to the Patreon thing, all right?
All right, good.
Okay, now before we go, first of all, a quick update, Bring Our Birds Home. Everything's ticking over. We've had some images come in from the planes from people around the world. I'm going to be getting into Air New Zealand shortly. There's a whole lot of things going on, sort of in the behind the scenes. Too boring to tell you about, but everybody, if you're interested, we haven't given up on that. I'll be appearing, and we should have gone to air or distributed this before this happens, on a Canadian TV show tomorrow, run by it's a show on a community channel, and a bunch of aviation enthusiasts have put on a program. We had Samir from Canada on our podcast quite a while ago, but he's the guy doing it, so I'm going to be talking about Bring Our Birds Home on that. So that's ticking over. But we do have a Patreon page for Bring Our Birds Home, and what I want to do is stick the toe into the Patreon water here, Martin, and so we can generate some support of that, but also the support of what we do, so we can do it more regularly, because we're having to make time in very busy schedules, and to do it consistently we need maybe a bit of support. So I've put the Patreon details graphically on the page now. If you want to hear more about podcast and help us out with Bring Our Birds Home, then go here and become our patrons. And we think that with the time and effort that we want to put into this, that we can have this program distributed quite widely around the aviation world. And I think it works, Martin, from, it's not totally a New Zealand perspective because you're in Australia, but from this part of the world, I think, it's good to have something that comes out of this part of the world, but commentates on the global scene. So, if we could get a few people just supporting what we do, we can find the time and just build on what we've been doing. We've got some radio opportunities to distribute to, so we'll get it out far and wide. All they got to do is go to the Patreon page for Bring Our Birds Home, to the bottom of the screen there, and maybe sign up. What do you think about that?
That's pretty good. Yeah, the podcast or the webcasts or the vlog, from the Trans-Tasman bubble.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing. Though I'm getting very sick of that word. I'm getting sick of new normal, bubble, and you'll save lives.
And anxiety. I'm sick of anxiety.
There does seem to be an industry in that.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it just seems to be the new buzzword. Oh, I'm feeling very anxious. Oh, well, get over it. What else are you going to do?
Well, they're putting $130 million into mental health services after this thing. So, good feeding, bit of a feeding frenzy there.
Yeah, Australia now has, I think, a minister for mental health, and they put 500 million in. So, yeah.
Okay, well, you're doing better than us.
Ka-ching.
Yeah, there you go. We're in the wrong business.
Mm.
Anyway, let's leave it there, and let's see what happens, and we'll try and get another. Now that we've because we've also had to work out how to do this technically, where you're at, where the best connection is. I'm pretty busy with radio the last 2 months. I've been one of the front lines, so I've been there all the time. The hours have been crazy. But it's taken a bit of time to sort this thing out, get it going. The Zoom thing is fantastic. And I think we're going to videoize slowly this production as well. We'll start to bring video back into it, footage. And for Kiwi stuff, we've got a great film library available for us, also for Australia. And, of course, people out there with footage, they like to get their footage seen. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we'll leave it there. Incredible times, tumultuous time, turbulent, to use a flying for turbulent times, Martin, turbulent.
Indeed.
Do your seatbelt up.
Yeah.
Get out the popcorn. So in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Paul Brennan, in the bunker in Auckland, and
goodbye from me from near Shady's Lagoon in Roma, Western Queensland.
Shady's Lagoon.
Yeah.
That sounds like an outback soap opera series.
Yeah. I'll show you.
Oh, there you go. As advertised.
Yeah.
All right, mate.
All right, Paul.